Well, hello everybody. I'm here in my music room and just wanted to reach out and let everybody know about some of the transition in what we've been offering of late. Most of the classic records, the MH archive records, and play copies and mastering copies and so forth have diminished, albeit there are copies behind me, some of which will be made available if there are duplicates, but there aren't that many. So instead, in the meantime, what I've started to do is to go through my own personal collection of about 30,000 pieces across a number of genres. Classical, jazz, punk, rock, pop, blues. There are some interesting things that I have often multiple copies of. And in fact, what I have here is an offering this week that you'll see, which is Mercury Living Presence. And these are all original copies of one vintage or another that I've collected over the last 40 plus years. And it's been very instructive going through these records. Again, I said there were multiple copies. My own personal tastes are not anymore to have one of everything, you know, to be a completist. I went through that phase at one point. And there's nothing wrong with that, but it takes a lot of energy, and you end up at some point saying to yourself, well, you know, there's some of this music that I really care about, and some that, you know, is really not my taste. So I think there's kind of a combination here going on with me going through my own personal collection, which is partly me saying, you know, which of these do I really care about? And if I've got 3 or 4 copies, sometimes maybe it's worthwhile letting those go, right? For somebody else to be able to enjoy them and or collect them and or, you know, have them raise in value. So anyway, that's the motivation behind all this. And I will say that in going through these Mercuries in particular, some really interesting things came up, and I'll point out a couple. This is one of the favorites that Harry Pearson and I used to listen to, the Wagner SR 90232, and of course he had a particular affection for the Guiana ballet of Khachaturian. Here's one that is interesting, very collectible, the Starker records, and this is a very, very, very nice copy. But you know what? To be honest, not my favorite record, right? An incredible performance of the Dvorak cello concerto, one of the top ones, but not super interesting to me, but incredibly collectible. And great sound, by the way. All of these have great sound. Some better than others, obviously. This Respighi, Ancient Dances and Airs for Lute with Dorati and the Philharmonia Hungaria, is a great record as well. All of these records are pretty amazing. But it was nice going through them and actually being able to listen to some of them. Here's, you know, a couple of my favorites. I did keep a copy for myself, but here's a Byron Janis SR 90260. And here's the one that everybody's after, really, which is the Byron Janis in Moscow with Kirill Kondrashin and the Moscow Philharmonic. This is the one where the mobile Mercury van with Wilma and her husband Robert Fine and Bob Eberens went over, and I remember Wilma telling me stories about going over and taking the mobile truck over and almost not getting in and so forth. But this is one of those 35 millimeter recordings that they did in Moscow in those famous sessions. And what's interesting about it is that this is the famed white label promo. Now, I'll tell you an interesting thing about white label promos. There are people out there, they fall into that category I called self-proclaimed experts, SPEs, from years ago, and it really makes them crazy when I call them that. But the people that say, for example, that white label promos are always the best because it's the first pressing and so forth. And I'm here to tell you that I'm reminded that that's not always the case. And for reasons that you might not think, which I'm reminded of from my experience with classic records, where we would cut multiple lacquers of a title. And the first lacquer was different from the second lacquer, was different from the third lacquer. And so to say that the first one cut is always going to be the best sound is not necessarily the case. So, and there's another issue that no one thinks about or talks about. And that is, if you've got the first mother, okay, that's the FR1. By the way, FR1 does not indicate stamper. It indicates mother, okay? So the mother, master, and then stampers were pulled from that. So you can get an FR1 that is a white label promo that is early in the stamper, maybe not, it's going to be good probably, right? But especially because they were going to send it out as a promotional item, so they wanted it to be good. But it might, later in the stamper, might be a better sounding record because the stampers had a chance to settle in or break in, as the old saying goes. Now, of course, I'm going to cause some controversy there because there's going to be a lot of self-proclaimed experts who are going to say, oh no, they all sound the same. Guess what? They don't. And until you've done the work of listening to records that come right off the press or different parts of the pressing run, you cannot speak with authority. Okay? I promise you that there are variations in sound across stampers. Now, by the way, an FR1 doesn't mean it's from the first stamper. It means it's the first cut of the first lacquer. So you could have stamper number 6 off of the first mother, the FR1, that sounds worse. Maybe it sounds better. It depends. There's a lot of variables here is the point. So turns out that white label promo of that Byron Janis record, SR90300, is sensational, right? It's a very good sounding record, and it's like, I might as well let this go and let somebody else have it. The point of the story only is that you can't always say that the first cut, the FR1 or the RFR1 sometimes is the best. And by the way, sometimes there was an FR1, which was the first mother, and then, some years went by maybe, and then they cut it again, and it's an RFR1. Well, conventional wisdom has always been that the FR1 is the one to have. Guess what? There are times where the RFR1 or the RFR3 actually sounds better. So I'm sad to report that it's not as easy as going for the most original early pressing, right? It's not that easy. Having a good pressing is important, but in terms of absolute sound quality, it's really down to an individual pressing is the sad news. And that's what I'm reminded of in having gone through and actually let the needle drop in these and listen to them. Here's an interesting one, the Soupe Overtures. I really enjoyed, actually. And then, of course, here's another one of the big HP records, Wagner for band, SR90276. Yeah, this is just a lot of great items that are being put up. I thought, of course, here's one of the HB Super Disc lists for many years. Tabu Hand. Sessions and McPhee are the two composers there. So anyway, I just wanted to reach out and let everybody know that some of my prized Mercuries are going to go on the block, and I wish everybody out there luck in terms of getting something that they've been looking for or something that they value, so that when you get them home, when you get it, hopefully that you can listen and enjoy it as much as I have. All right, good luck.